Good morning, everyone. This is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, April 7th general meeting. It is 9 a.m. and we will start with a roll call of commissioners.
Mr. Chair. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Nanjapa.
Here.
Commissioner Hackett.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 out of 7 commissioners present.
Great, thank you. Good to see everybody. Welcome to a Wednesday morning. I hope everybody is well. We have a few matters on our agenda. We have general public comment. We will then have an executive session to receive legal advice on the requirements for payments of proceeds applications and the COGCC's rights and options in bankruptcy. We have a consent agenda, and then we finish off with commissioner comments. So with that, hopefully we have the participants with us who desire to present, and they signed up by noon yesterday. I see we have 35 people with us. Hearings manager Amaro, are you locating folks that are on our list? And if so, the first person that we have is Laura Hickerno, followed by Catherine Merlin, and then Lisa G.
Yeah, can't find Laura or Catherine at this point. I am on Lisa right now. And I will do, Leslie is here. Leslie Glustrom, we can let her in.
Hello, Ms. Glustrom. We see that you're with us. You would want to unmute yourself?
Good morning, commissioners. I didn't realize that that's what I was supposed to be doing at this point. I thought I was still in line here. Thank you so much for taking public comment. And my name is Leslie Glustrom, and I live in Colorado and really appreciate the work you're doing and just really want to encourage you to move faster. I spend most of my time at the Public Utilities Commission and have been a participant over there for, not quite 20 years, but you don't see me so often here. But I have asthma and I'm chemically sensitive. And, we just have a big problem in Colorado. I'm afraid you inherited a big problem. And I just really want to encourage you to work fast. You won't hear from me that often, but I'm only one of thousands and thousands of people that suffer because you're not supposed to be able to see the air, and you're supposed to be able to live in your home without the noise and the chemicals and the benzene and the nosebleeds. And so I'm sorry you inherited such a big problem, but I just hope and I'm praying and I'm begging that you'll move very quickly. Sometimes it's portrayed as a balance between sort of public health and safety and jobs. You clearly have a clear statutory mandate to take care of public health and safety, and that hasn't been done. So there's a lot of cleanup to do it. I refer to it as our monstrous methane mess. And you're the folks that need to clean it up for us. And it's a big, big job, as you know, including all the orphan wells. But the jobs, please, most of the oil and gas industry has not been earning money. The analysis says that in 2020, they finally broke into the black barely, but that's because they've greatly reduced their capital expenditures. And so this is a lesson Colorado's had to learn over and over again, is that when you have jobs based on non-renewable materials, those jobs are going to go away. And I'm very sympathetic to that, but it should not get in the way of taking care of our air and our water. People are dying. I'm in Boulder. Yes, you have gun violence. It's very clear. Somebody goes crazy and people die. But when it comes to this sort of thing, when the air is as bad as it is, we're in the top 5 worst cities in the country. When the air is as bad as it is, people are dying. It's harder to trace the causation trail back to the COGCC or whatever, but it's there. So again, thank you so much for your work. Please move very quickly, and please recognize that it's really, it's public health and safety, and we'll do what we can to try to transition the jobs, but they're going away anyways. We've seen it in coal. We're going to see it in oil and gas. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking my testimony, and I'm Godspeed, as they say. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Glustrom. I appreciate your attending with us and appreciate the comments. We're working hard, I can promise you. So thanks again for being with us this morning. I'm going to keep going down the list, Hearings Manager Amaro. If one of the folks that we've skipped shows up, just feel free to let me know. I believe we had Guillermo Serna next.
He still has not showed up, Mr. Chair. The next person I have up is J.D. Ribble.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll put him in and come back to the others.
Okay, I guess I'm unmuted.
We can hear you, Mr. Robo.
Yeah. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak from the heart. So I'm not going to be reading anything. So if I say something that sounds derogatory or something, just know that I just want to address this group. I live in Weld County, Windsor specifically. Within this area that we have a sheriff that just recently called one of the representatives a terrorist. I live by a park that I can actually watch the white supremacists recruit people. And the way that the Suncor event just went recently, the way that the state actually took sides with an industry, I feel very disappointed. And I want to say this, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, just how some people believe the earth is flat. Well, what I believe is the state actually works for the industry. And even though the mandate that says on your site that, for the health and welfare of the people, again, this is only my belief, that the interest is primarily for the oligarch is what I kind of see. And on that same note, I want to share another story, and this actually ties directly into what you do. Living by a park, it's amazing the things that I see. Every day we pick up trash. It's always it's filthy. My neighbor told one of the guys the other day, he said, "Hey, there's a trash can over there." And the guy said, "Hey, old man, want me to kick your butt?" But he didn't use those words. So when I'm sitting there reflecting on this, I almost feel the same within the commissions that are charged with taking care of us, is the attitude of the people that are actually coming to this area, which in this case, I'm going to kind of talk about, say, the industry, the disregard and the disrespect that's actually shown. It's comparable to what we see here. And I really feel disappointed when I see areas like, with the clean air, when come to find out the supervisor's telling the people to actually hide evidence and to lie. And one thing that I notice a lot of times, people come on and they build your ego saying, "Oh, it's such a great job you're doing." In reality, I think what we need to be doing is saying, "Look, folks, we're in trouble. This is what it is." And as an older guy, I think that's what the problem is because we're too easily swayed to look the other way. So one thing that I noticed with the industry here, and again, I'm going to use the example of the park, a family sitting out there enjoying themselves, because here in Windsor, you can actually go by and they call it dieseling. And I can imagine a family sitting there just minding their own business. Remember, and I'm talking about because this is a public place, just like our oxygen and our water, it's all public shared. So here comes these people who have authority, who are actually entitled, and they come up to this family and they let the exhaust off, like they call it dieseling, which I'm sure you're familiar with that. They actually contaminate the water that they're drinking. And the folks have no leverage because guess what? All the authority actually is on the folks that came into that park and took over because they essentially are in line and in tune with the same kind of people that will call a representative a terrorist and will actually recruit and ensure that there's hate going on.
Mr. Ruckel, if you could wrap up. You're well past your time.
Okay, I apologize, but for going past, but I really want to see that you see from a different perspective what is really going on. It's looking terrible, folks. You got to figure out who you represent. And again, it's my opinion and my opinion alone that you actually work for the industry as opposed to the people.
Thank you for presenting to us and presenting us with your opinion. Hearings Manager Amaro, I'm not going to try to guess who may be next that signed up. Maybe if you could just find the next person and alert us to their name, that would be easy.
Shayna Oliver is next. We'll add her as a promoter right now. Okay, so she's not in the room anymore. I can do Lucy Molina. She's on the list.
Okay.
Buenos dias. Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ms. Molina. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I'm late. I do want to let you know that Guillermo is in an eye appointment and he's running a little late, but I think he will be hopping on. Don Guillermo from Commerce City. Well, my name is Lucy Molina from Commerce City. I didn't really prepare anything. I always try to come and first of all, thank you, the commission and all of you guys for the hard work that you guys have in your hands. I do ask, I try to bring a humanizing the situation that our community goes through. Just sharing my story as always. Right now, I'm heading to the hospital again, which my mother ended up in the hospital again yesterday and had to stay overnight. You know, cancer is a big issue in our community, and diabetes, asthma. I'm just trying to bring it really down to a notch, to humanizing the health impacts that our communities face in Commerce City and in impacted areas. I hope that this year, after the coronavirus and all this respiratory issues, will give the commission and our state a little bit more concern for our humanity and for our communities. Again, as I've always mentioned, my kids have asthma, migraines, eczema. So it gets expensive. I do, again, thank you. I had something prepared, but I'm running out the door really to go back to the hospital with my mother. And I think you guys need to know the reality of what happens to impacted communities. God bless you again, and thank you so much for all your work. And I'll continue to show up when I can. God bless you. Gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Molina, and we wish all the best for your mom. And thanks for taking time to attend with us, given the circumstances. All the best.
Thank you.
Hearings
Chair?
Manager Amaro, who may be next?
Yeah, Shayna Oliver is next.
hello?
Yeah, Ms. Oliver, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. My name is Shayna Oliver. I'm a field organizer for Eco Madres Moms Clean Air Force Colorado, a national organization of mothers, dads, caregivers united in fighting for all children's right to breathe and play in clean air. Colorado's the 10th worst state for poor air quality, according to the State of the Air Report by the American Lung Association for ozone, smog pollution. And a lot of that comes from oil and gas and a lot of the technology that's supposed to be capturing leaks. So obviously you can't catch all the pollution around these industries. But over 37,000 members in Colorado are looking to your leadership to mitigate for cleaner air and to mitigate true leadership and addressing health and safety as well as environment, that you guys are supposed to be working on that. Most importantly, I am an Indigenous mother of 4. We are descendants of the genocide known as the Indian Removal Act, known to my people as the Long Walk of the Navajo. These type of policies, violations have run a historic impact on Indigenous people, community, health, wealth, and environmental well-being. This is the land of the Cheyenne and Arapaho and the Ute, as well as 46 other tribes that had resided in Colorado prior to the removal, prior to the Indian Removal Act. And it just goes to show how we're still struggling and we're still dealing with genocide to this day. This industry has marked its long historic genocide on these lands and still continues to this day. And scientists have known for decades that air pollution is harmful to health. And this is especially true for vulnerable populations such as older adults, people with underlying health conditions, communities of color, low-income communities, pregnant women, and children. Coming from the Navajo Reservation, I see the health impacts on my people with increased heart disease, diabetes, asthma, cancer, leukemia, adverse birth outcomes, and premature deaths in the general population for Indigenous people. And this is so true for the same people that live around these same communities that are impacted with fossil fuel industries, such as the oil and gas refineries, such as oil and gas drilling sites. We are never heard when we've been screaming for decades that we knew this destruction would come. And the destruction has been coming and has been present in our reality for a very long time, with genocide and now cancer, leukemia, diabetes, asthma, heart disease. These things all stem from and connect to air pollution, as well as ground level ozone increases these disparities for our communities, and especially our women and our babies. Moms Clean Air Force have a ton of resources for people to look and see the health impacts on mothers and babies. And I push you to support our Momness bill of protecting mothers and babies from climate change. So these are the things that we are supporting: mothers and babies' health, as well as the community health, because the economic burden on health services is tremendous. And if we could bring healthier communities, we would have a healthier social economic pathway for our next 7 generations if we actually took a look at the racial discrimination when it comes to fossil fuels and communities. And now we're looking at science. People need to really pay attention to science. We don't have that much time to address these issues anymore. My people have given you a whole century to address these issues, and scientists today tell us you only have less than 10 years to address these issues now. So your time is up, and we need true leadership in this generation. Within the next 10 years, we need true leadership within these last 5 years. We
Thank you,
push
Ms. Oliver.
for
If you could
climate change
wrap up,
action.
please.
And we need your leadership to make sure Senate Bill 1881 is bolder. We need to make sure that 1261 is bolder under your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver. Thank you for being with us this morning. I believe we now have Brenda Bozeman.
A brief history of Colorado and its elected officials looking out for big business and government interests and not the people of Colorado, who they are sworn to serve and protect. Rocky Flats manufactured plutonium detonators from 1952 until 1989. Major sources of contamination on and off site were 2 fires, one in 1957 and then again in 1969. An accidental release of plutonium into the air in 1974. Numerous leaks of metal-laden oil from barrels stored outside since 1958, and a chromic acid spill in 1989. All of these events polluting the air, water, and land. Cleanup to restore Rocky Flats to its original site was not possible. Although it is well documented, the higher levels of cancers, especially rare cancers from working at Rocky Flats or in the nearby neighborhoods or downwind from the plant, government officials continue to deny any harm and claim that the land, though extremely toxic, is somehow safe. Rocky Mountain Arsenal was a U.S. chemical weapons manufacturing center located in Commerce City from 1942 until 1992. Mustard gas, napalm, white phosphorus, lewisite, chlorine gas, and sarin were manufactured at the site. In the 1980s, the site was placed on the National Priorities List, a list of the most contaminated areas in the U.S. and designated as a Superfund site. Rocky Mountain Arsenal contained a deep injection well that was constructed in 1961. The Army discontinued the use of the well in February 1966 because the fluid injection triggered a series of earthquakes in the area. The disposal well was permanently sealed in 1985, still housing all of the many lethal chemicals. Rocky Mountain Arsenal is just a few short miles from my home. This area around the arsenal is too close for comfort to where you are willing to let oil and gas frack. Is there no foresight to the dangers ahead of disturbing this land? Or of what happens to if the injection well fails? Why are you willing to court disaster? Why is human life so easily expendable over profits? You've already heard the pleas of so many suffering from the effects of fracking in their neighborhoods, and yet it falls on deaf ears. When state and federal officials tell us to trust them, it's safe, they have no track record at all to stand on. We have been telling you no. We do not want oil and gas in our neighborhoods and communities in as many ways as we can think of. You pretend to listen and then continue to make the side deals with oil and gas, hoping we will shut up and go away. We are frustrated, angry, and fed up. We expect you to do your job to protect us, not oil and gas, and we are not going away. Where is our ingenuity, our creativity, our independence, our desire to progress and move forward to a better life? Colorado does not need to prostitute itself out to oil and gas. We can grow a healthy and vibrant economy in a million different ways and protect our beautiful state and the legacy we leave behind for those who come after us. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Weston Wilson.
Yes, good morning. This is Weston Wilson, Science Advisor for Be the Change Colorado. In 2010, I too was a whistleblower on EPA's failure to explain the pollution risks of groundwater from fracking. That complaint led to Congress exempting fracking from getting permits under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Well, late last month, several employees of the Air Quality Control Division stepped forward to allege that Director Gary Kaufman had been violating the Clean Air Act. He's been cheating, they allege, granting shortcuts to polluters, so serious as to directly contribute to chronic health problems and premature death. The examples they list include oil and gas facilities. Now, when academic studies, particularly those by Anschutz Medical Center, Dr. Lisa McKenzie, displayed chronic health problems, one study showed 40% increase in birth defects from residents near oil and gas facilities. What did you commissioners on the Oil and Gas Commission conclude then? Was this just bad science, as the former director of the Air Quality Control Commission alleged? Or perhaps you understood the Clean Air Act was a weak law that required Director Kaufman to issue operators' rights to pollute. After all, there's just a few pollutants like particulate matter and ozone which have ambient limits, and there's no ambient limit established for toxic gases like benzene and toluene. Perhaps now we know the answer. The science is real. The law is indeed weak, but actions by an alleged cheater and a manager who's been falsifying data may have resulted in more asthmas, more cancers, and worse COVID outcomes. This commission should halt new permitting until a new director at the Air Quality Control Division will show that they are complying with the law, both the Clean Air Act and SB 181, which obligates protection of public health. You have a serious problem on your hands. Facilities you're permitting are contributing to premature death. This will stop, either by the government or we the people. Thank you.
Next, we have Jamie Valdez.
Hello. Thank you for this time to give comments. It was just a couple of weeks ago that we saw good rich carbon here in Pueblo, along with several other of Colorado's major polluters of benzene and other air toxins, change their numbers in response to the newly introduced HB 21-1189 in a blatant attempt and a shameful attempt to avoid regulation under the bill, which showed us once again, like we've seen over and over, that polluting corporations cannot just be naively trusted to do the right thing on their own without regulations and oversight. Then, just on the heels of that revelation, we find out, not from the corporations from themselves or even from our state regulators, but from whistleblowers, that the people charged with protecting our health and environment at the APCD/CDPHE have ordered employees to stop performing modeling by the required by the Clean Air Act, and thereby endangering the health of countless Coloradans. All of this shows the need for independent, real-time fence line and community-based monitoring and stringent regulation of polluting industries. I'm from Pueblo, Colorado. I am a community organizer for Mothers Out Front, and my Pueblo community is already plagued with increased rates of asthma, COPD, and cardiovascular disease because ours is an economy built on a polluting manufacturing industry that, while polluting our environment and threatening our health, simply does not provide us the economic boost we might hope to see as a return on our investment for our health and local environment. On top of this, we have air pollution, contaminated bodies of water, surface water, and other environmental impacts from pollution and climate change. We are by definition an environmental justice community, or to be frank, a sacrifice zone. And we are sick at higher rates as a result, and we are tired of it. Environmental racism and classism are real and are the ugly remnants of colonialism that still impact largely Latinx and indigenous communities like Pueblo disproportionately. Moms, dads, and grandparents like me are worried for our own health and for the future of our progeny, and we are mad as hell. It's way past time commissions like this one and the APCD and CDPHE stop naively thinking polluting corporations whose top priority is not health or environment, but profit, will do the right thing under their own or on their own and start protecting us. The people of the people of this great state from these polluters, and let them know once and for all that we are not their currency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. We now have Rana Sanchez.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you. I appreciate all the work you do and hope you will continue to put health and safety at the forefront of your decisions. This is so important. Our air is horrible, and I implore you to do something about it. I'm a leukemia survivor, and as such, I'm very conscious of and interested in things that negatively affect health issues. I lived in Weld County for over 30 years. I moved to Commerce City to get away from all the oil and gas activity and all the oil and gas fanatics that live there. I selected Commerce City because I did not see a lot of oil and gas wells around there, and the developer dishonestly told us there were no plans there for oil and gas development. I would like to address the Edmondson site now. The Edmondson site met two of the director's criteria, which were in place on January 11th when the wells were approved administratively and 4 days before the effective date of the COGCC's new rules. The two criteria were closer than 2,000 feet from a school and also within the Brighton public water system. Why wasn't additional scrutiny undertaken as promised by the director's criteria? Secondly, affected mineral rights owners in the Outlook neighborhood under which the Edmondson wells will frack have formally submitted a forced pooling protest. They're represented by Wild Earth Guardians. Several hundred homes in Outlook are involved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. We now have Christy Douglas. Ms. Douglas, if you could unmute yourself, we'd like to hear from you.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, is this
Can you hear
Ms.
me?
Douglas?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have an older computer. I have no camera or microphone.
That's
so I have
okay.
to be on the phone. So, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, commissioners, for offering public comment on a weekly basis. I mean, you don't have to do this, but you do, and I appreciate it. And I mean, I come to you as a citizen that I hope that you listen to us and that you don't think that we're coming to you to beat you up, because we're not. So my name is Christy Douglas, and I am an actively involved member of the Commerce City and Adams County community. I'm a little bit emotional listening to all the people coming to you this morning. I'm a wife, I'm a mother of 5, I'm a grandmother of 5. I'm hopefully a good neighbor, and I've been a social justice activist for many years. And the reason that I've done that was because 10 years ago, they came into Commerce City and they fracked an old well. And they came in the dead of night and started setting up equipment. Nobody knew what was going on. And it took us a whole week to say that it was fracking to get the authorities to admit that it was fracking. And it was done in an enclave of Adams County, surrounded completely by the authority of Commerce City. So there was nothing that we could do about it. You know, it was already in the works anyway. Matt Lepore was the attorney then for that particular company who was going in and whatever they were doing to that old well. They then set up, the city set up a what they called a land use committee. And it was made up of all kinds of different representatives. They had all kinds of people who were representing the oil and gas industry. And we had a really hard time as citizens getting a seat at the table. They set it up in a little room that was shut off from everything else when they could have had it in the main council room where they also hold legal hearings, a judge does. And so they packed us into this little tiny room. And like I said, they wouldn't let citizens have a seat at the table. But we did get to sit around the table behind these people. And there was one meeting that I was at where I sat behind an oil and gas guy. His name was Chris Castellian. He worked for Anadarko. And he was playing Angry Birds on his phone. And after everyone was allowed to speak, he was very cavalier and pompous. And he just had this attitude. And he said in a snarky tone of voice, "I don't know why we're here. This is a waste of time. We're going to win in the end anyway." And now I see around 10 sites developing along E470 and one that ends up in Commerce City, again in an enclave of Adams County, but surrounded by Commerce City. And there's nothing we can do about it again. And I know that there's so many sites. Extraction has permits set up already with Commerce City. And then I had to listen to all of these oil and gas people the other night when the council was hearing comments on the new regs and threats of suing and personally recalling the council. I just want you to know who you're working with. I will. You have to hear me out, though. This is my story. We are a marginalized community. We do not deserve more of the same. You heard someone else talk about the arsenal. Please know who you're dealing with here and who you're regulating, because they will stop at nothing to get what they want. What is the price that my children, your children, our children will have to pay for your paycheck, their paychecks, but even more than that, the extreme ultra wealth of a few who can afford to buy the narrative? So what's the price? Take a good look at who you're regulating. Thank you.
I think we now have Renee Millard-Chalcon.
Buenos días, Cuautitlanetsi. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Chalcon.
Hello. We do live on the land of the Ute, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Jicarilla, Apache, Navajo, Lakota, Comanche people and surviving generations, both urban and rural, of the thousands of indigenous descendants of 48 tribes that still travel through Denver. I constantly remind us of this to be good living ancestors now in your actions. Please reimagine how to dismantle all targeting practices of white supremacy and predatory capitalism, favoring some while harming those most at risk. This needs to happen now because yes, pain is inevitable, but allowing us to suffer with no protection has completely been optional. Even in this space, Indigenous BIPOC communities that survived and built resiliency should be at the front of any and all leadership and climate policy making and rulemaking to reimagine something anew from systems designed to continually target. We need to invest in Black, Brown, Indigenous communities that have been excluded, oppressed, and harmed by unjust practices. This investment will seek to support job creation, pollution reduction, and climate resilience. We need those most affected in communities to have the power to democratically plan, implement, and minister our own projects. Because do you truly know what extractive industries have done to my homeland with predatory capitalism in Commerce City? Yes, Suncor has repeatedly violated its air pollution in disproportionate communities for decades and fought reporting requirements and modifications of its permits to refine dirtier tar sands oil, releasing even more toxins. This warning is now an endangerment to all, and Colorado voters have overwhelmingly have already told you that they want climate action. Nearly 3/4 of voters, 73%, approve of the state enacting targets to reduce carbon emissions, including over half of Republicans, 52%, and 72% of unaffiliated voters. 71% of the voters agreed that the AQCC should act within the next year to create rules that guarantee that the state will meet its climate targets. What are you doing? Benzene, hydrogen cyanide, and hydrogen sulfide are fiercely dangerous chemicals and carcinogens to be reckless about anymore, with public safety and slow protection with current public endangerment. Coloradans are too familiar with the consequences of climate change and harmful air pollution, both from recent wildfires and constant air pollution. Even before the pandemic, early pollution led to almost 250,000 premature deaths a year in the US. By powering our homes, businesses, cars, trucks, and more with clean energy from renewable sources such as solar and wind, we can actually improve this air quality for Coloradans and support public health. 60% of Coloradans already work in clean energy in state ranks. I ask that when you look at every energy sector, every health sector from here on out, and most of all, our disproportionately affected communities, really look at it with equity analysis, but from our own self-determination. We need to empower communities that have been repeatedly subject to systemic racism and environmental violence, particularly starting with Indigenous people, Latinx people, and Black communities and more. If extractive industries are given the privilege to vent on us, they should be held as moral people and held to further violence and environmental crimes when they're committed on people and land. Further confining communities socioeconomically to spaces lacking the environmental necessities to life is environmental racism blatantly, and you're targeting us. This is more than enough cause to accountability, and most of all, consequences for the further public endangerment. We're tired of being choked out and flushed out, and we have the right to know who, when, where, and what methods are used to being harmed in us, and most of all, to ask you to protect us. You represent us. The particulate pollution also makes those suffering from these effects more susceptible to death by COVID. The marginalized and impoverished communities experience this degradation as nausea, nosebleeds, headaches, asthma, anemia, childhood leukemia, and babies born at low birth rates. To this day, I suffer with anemia myself, and there's not a day I don't take out food shares to our elders and local community that are also affected directly in these spaces. They have absolutely no protection and representation. And now they don't have anybody to even be there for them. Protecting
Ms.
people.
Millard, back on. If you could wrap up, you're well over time.
Yes. Protecting people over polluters will take your courage and humility to recognize the reality harming us all now. We know where you're failing us. This is a system that isn't broken, but is working as designed. I'm asking you to change it with transparency, monitoring, and redistribution of wealth by the corporations that have already harmed us, and we know they have. We deserve free, prior, and informed consent, autonomy, and self-determination for all decisions that affect us. To achieve healing, we must continue to establish leaders like Deb Haaland in systems that have once dehumanized and targeted us to truly restore our humanity and stolen wealth for generations. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.
Thank you for attending and providing us your public comment. Commissioners, I believe that is the extent of the folks that have signed up. There were a few others that signed up, but they have not joined us this morning. And so with that, we will move down our agenda. I do not believe we have a report from either the executive director or the director this morning. And with that, I believe we're looking for to move into our executive session. And so I would look to Assistant Attorney General Kyle Davenport for some guidance on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the next item is executive session. Commissioners, I know you're familiar with the process. I have a little script to read, and then we'll need a motion to move into executive session. Pursuant to open meetings law, the commission is entitled to enter into executive session at this meeting for the purpose of receiving legal advice pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute Section 24.6 402 3A Roman 2. The topics of executive session were identified on the agenda for today. They are to receive legal advice on the legal requirements for payment of proceeds matters pursuant to 3460 118.5 and to receive legal advice on the Commission's rights and obligations in bankruptcy. Mr. Chair, I invite you to encourage a motion to enter into executive session for the matters and purposes I just named.
Commissioners, looking for a motion to enter into executive session as denoted by AAG Davenport.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the motion carries. To the general public, we're going to be about an hour and a half in executive session. We will plan on returning at 11:45 to this meeting. And commissioners, you're now encouraged to close this Zoom and open the executive session Zoom, and then we will undertake the executive session. We'll be back here at about, well, let's see here, 11 or 9:45, 10:45. AG Davenport, let me look to you. Do you know how long you're planning on taking?
The 90 minutes was to be on the safe side. Maybe an hour and some change.
Okay. So we'll likely return here in about an hour. So everyone else can stay tuned on this Zoom channel, and we will reconvene after executive session. Thank you. All right, there we go. We found Commissioner Messner. AAG Davenport, I think we're all back now, and I think we need to exit executive session. Is that right? I think you probably got a script.
I do.
Go for it.
It's a short one though. Commissioners, we are returning from executive session. In the executive session today, the Commissioner received legal advice that was identified on the agenda on the legal principles in payment of proceeds matters pursuant to Section 3460 118.5 of the Act, as well as the Commission's rights and obligations in bankruptcy. During the course of that executive session, no votes were taken and no decisions were made by the Commission. We do need a motion to exit executive session, Mr. Chair.
Seeking such a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second to exit executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we are exited executive session. Anything more, AAG Davenport, or can I move on to the next part of our agenda?
Please move on.
Okay. The consent agenda is next. We have one payment of proceeds matter on the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions about that? And if not, looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did not have any issues with the recommendation. I think I had some questions about the operator, and it's concerning to me that we did not hear back from the operator at all. And I did ask Director Murphy if they had been turning in their form, I think it's a Form 7, which is their monthly production levels. And it appears to me that perhaps that hasn't been happening. And so I'm wondering if we can find out what's going on with this operator.
Director Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I checked in with Mr. Leonard yesterday about the operator, and I wanted to confirm that we've inspected their locations in September of last year and January of this year. The only field issues we identified were to update signs. Following your question, Commissioner McGowan, staff has issued NOAVs for production reporting, 811 membership with One Call Colorado, and an overdue MIT. My understanding is that this MIT has been performed, and my understanding, and I think we could probably bring in Mr. Farron, although I want to be very cautious about that because it is enforcement, that they're represented by counsel. So kind of a complicated answer given the lack of responsiveness in the payment of proceeds scenario.
Any follow-up, Commissioner McGowan?
So are they responding to our staff when our staff are asking questions about things?
Based on what my communications with Mr. Leonard, yes.
Okay. I guess I would like some inputs from some other commissioners. It's concerning to me that an operator would not even respond to a royalty owner's non-payment issues, just to simply just not respond at all. I don't know, just as a red flag for me. So I don't know what exactly to do as far as follow-up, but the fact that they also have not submitted some required documentation to us that gives us information about what's happening, I guess is also a little bit of a red flag for me. So I don't know exactly what to do. I'm just expressing some concern, and so I don't know if other commissioners have some ideas.
Commissioner Nanjapa, and then Commissioner Messner.
I saw John Commissioner Messner first.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yeah, along those lines, I am similarly concerned with this. Is there any recourse, or can we request a hearing with them just to discuss kind of, I don't know, current plans with the reports that they haven't submitted, or is this already potentially it could become an enforcement matter, in which case that process can kind of proceed as it would?
Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that was a question by Commissioner Nanjapa, but I can.
It was. Thank you.
Director Murphy, do you want to field the question first?
Sure, Commissioner Nanjapa, we have initiated an enforcement action, and that will come to that presumably. I can't predict the outcome of that matter, but presumably will come before the commission at some point in time.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Commissioner McGowan, for bringing this up and looking a little further into it. I would agree with you that this does potentially raise a red flag. I do appreciate Director Murphy reaching out to Mike Leonard and the fact that there has been inspections, a couple of inspections, and now we have NOAVs that have been issued. I think is good follow-up. I certainly would, from my opinion, I would encourage us to continue to stay right on top of this operator with multiple inspections to ensure that operations are following our rules and regulations, because these type of things do raise red flags and do require additional scrutiny and attention, and if necessary, NOAVs. And so ultimately, I think those NOAVs do come in front of us, and maybe that's the appropriate time to ask additional questions.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I appreciate raising this issue, appreciate staff looking into it, and that enforcement is proceeding. I mean, with regard to the specific item that's before us today, back when I had a lawyer hat that I wore, there were any number of times when a party decided not to defend it himself or herself or itself. And it really is just, it's an admission of guilt, or an admission of that they owe the money. And so I'm comfortable moving forward, with this consent agenda item, given the, where it's at this point.
Mr. Chair, I did have one question about what I think I read in the documents, and that was that the payment is from 8/1/19 through 3/24/20, and I'm wondering if that is correct. If someone could clarify that for me, and if that is correct, does that mean that the operator has started paying after 3/24/20? Do we know?
I think that's based upon what was asked in the complaint when it was originally filed, but do we have a hearings officer that might be able to further answer that question, or Director Murphy or AG Davenport?
Director Murphy,
going on.
I'm here if you need me.
If you haven't answered the question, we need you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Hearing Officer Peskin. I will say this much. This is not my docket. This is Hearing Officer Thomas's docket. He is out today at an all-day CLE, so he probably deserves some mercy for that. But I will say that the commission is bound by the request for relief granted as it stands. I can't speak to the specific amounts. I do know that the amounts requested were prepared by the applicant, and those are the amounts that we have to accept as true because there's been no counter showing.
Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm just hoping that the protestant, I don't know what to call the person who filed
In this case, Commissioner, they're the applicant.
The applicant. I'm hoping that we're not going to have to see them come back again and ask for payment from 3/24 through current date, I guess. So anyway, I'm done.
I can say, if I may, Chair.
Yes, please, Mr. Peskin.
I can say, Commissioner McGowan, that these exhibits were prepared following March of 2020. In fact, sometime over the last couple months, I believe. So Hearing Officer Thomas is very thorough. I know that he would have ensured that they were as accurate as possible. I personally can't answer the question, but I would be surprised if there's information missing that's a year old at this point.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Najapa.
Thank you. Just following up on that last point, would it be possible in our next hearing to just get an update from Hearing Officer Thomas on whether there have been payments since the date on this order?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I qualify that? That's assuming that we have that information as commissioners.
Yeah, I think that's the point. But do what you can with that question, given the questions from our fellow commissioners here.
Yeah,
Of course.
and just to clarify, given that as Hearing Officer Peskin just mentioned, that this was something that was sort of addressed and materials provided just in the last couple of months, if we have that information that they're, you know, that the date was based on past payments not received, but, you know, otherwise current, that would just, I'm just curious if we can get an update on that information, if that's possible.
I will speak with Hearing Officer Thomas when he returns to work in the morning, and we will pass that information along as best we can.
Other questions about the consent agenda? Seeing no further questions, do we have a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We are at that point of the agenda in which we have potential for commissioner comments. I had a couple of quick comments. One, I wanted the record to reflect, and I meant to do this at public comment earlier, but we did have 2 written public commenters, and I always want to acknowledge those people because we really appreciate written public comments, and that was Megan Wilder and Ronald Bruce. So thank you both for providing written public comment. Sorry I didn't note that earlier. Secondly, just in sort of housekeeping matters, I wanted my fellow commissioners to be aware that I have listened to the 1:49 March 31st evening public comment session around financial assurances. So I'm fully up to speed on that. We received wonderful public comment from a lot of folks that evening. Thank you for indulging a family matter that I had, but I have now heard that. Our YouTube channel is awesome in that we can go back and you know, anybody can go back and listen to hearings that are before us if they are unable to fall asleep or otherwise. And then just for the public at large, the commissioners had established a Friday, I think 9 a.m., 10 a.m. work session in which we didn't really have an agenda, and it was every single Friday. And we've decided to maybe back that off to do it bi-weekly. We just didn't have enough on the agenda. And so this Friday's work session is canceled, and then we'll start bi-weekly starting up next Friday. So, and our website is or will be adjusted to reflect this calendar change. And anybody can attend those meetings. We're not taking public comment, but if you want to listen to us talk amongst ourselves, feel free every other Friday. So those are the public comments that I have. Do other commissioners have commissioner comments? Commissioner Hackett.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. I just wanted to share a couple upcoming events from CDPHE that folks and commissioners might be interested in attending. First, from the Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division, as part of CDPHE's ongoing efforts to characterize, dispose of, and manage technologically enhanced naturally occurring radioactive materials, the Waste Division will be hosting a T-Norm forum next Tuesday, April 13th from 2 to 4. And that's part of their efforts to develop guidance surrounding the new T-Norm rules that they adopted last year. Their information, they have their own T-Norm website where you can sign up to receive notifications about that and attend those meetings. And then the only other thing I wanted to share was from the Air Quality Control Commission's perspective, next Thursday they are having a hearing. There's going to be a couple matters that may be of interest for folks. In particular, the Air Division will be requesting a rulemaking hearing to revise their regulation number 7. And if that's adopted, it would become part of Colorado's state implementation plan, which is required by the Federal Clean Air Act to come into compliance with the ozone standards. And what they'll be proposing is new and enhanced emission control requirements and work practice requirements to minimize emissions of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds from process heaters used by a variety of industries, most notably the oil and gas industry and the metal parts surface coating operations in the Denver Metro North Front Range area. And then there's a couple other informational items that aren't directly related necessarily to regulation of oil and gas, but they may be of interest. The Colorado Department of Agriculture and CSU will be providing an update on ongoing efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the agriculture sector. CDOT will provide a briefing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. And then commissioners will also receive a briefing on new and emerging technologies for carbon capture and sequestration. So just wanted to share that, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hackett. Always appreciate the updates from our sister agency. Other commissioners, Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So speaking of Friday meetings, maybe I misunderstood, but I think we discussed on Friday having a discussion today around calendaring a general timeline for the financial assurances rulemaking. And maybe that needs to be an agenda item and we can't do it in commissioner comments, or I'm not sure the legalities of that one, but I do think that that is something that the commissioners were interested in talking about. Not a solid calendar, but a general calendar that people can start planning around as far as what timing may look like around financial assurance rulemaking.
As you know, I was on spring break last week, and so I was not in the meeting on Friday. My 2 cents around this is I would rather direct Director Murphy to start to Gantt chart that out a little bit and give her a chance to do that on her own and with staff, and then maybe bring something back to us for us to look at. But that's just one commissioner musing about that issue.
And I do think that it's appropriate to provide that direction. We couldn't provide direction from the work session, right? So now that we're in a regular session, that could be a way to go. I think it was just bringing that topic up for discussion so that we could provide direction or action.
Director Murphy?
I can start working on that. The general observations I would provide is that the formal rulemaking cannot start until we submit the notice to the Secretary of State. And then the deadlines from the submitting the notice, it's some number of days after publication. But what to me drives more of the formal rulemaking timeline is the process through which stakeholders, interested parties, and formal parties can submit information. In my experience with the commission, it's a 3-ish month process, I would say, on the tightest timelines. And so that's always in the back of my mind. You know, I will need a couple of weeks to finalize draft rules and a notice and a statement of basis and purpose, and then we're still in for another few months of process. You know, I think that we continue to learn how to do things better, and thinking about when staff would reissue revisions, revised drafts, and that process is important. But that's kind of the rough timeline. And then the timeline from the final adoption date to the effective date varies because of once it's adopted, there are a few final procedures, and then it has to be published finally, and then it's a few weeks after publication. So all told, you know, it's a multi-month process. And I think if you all know, if you all were to say we would like something effective by this date, or we'd like to be at a hearing by about this date, I can back calculate a process more easily. Or if you just want to take kind of the other approach, which is to say, you know, let's go get some rules drafted and the process kicked off, and we can continue to do some investigation in the interim period, that's fine too. And I'll work with the hearings team to put together a timing and or a process for the pre-hearing process as well.
Commissioner Najapa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Murphy, for that, and Commissioner Messer for bringing this up. I think the one thing maybe, at least for me personally, that would be helpful is to think about when I think we all were talking a little bit about a second informational hearing where we could maybe get some of the questions that were raised by some of the stakeholders answered, or have some additional presentations from entities that were recommended or suggested in some of the stakeholder materials. And so, you know, at least in a more, you know, immediate need would be maybe trying to figure out when that hearing is going to be. And related to that, I guess for me, I'm thinking about, you know, meetings I might want to have with other folks leading up to that, you know, whether staff or stakeholders. So that, you know, at least for me, it's less about when the actual rulemaking takes place, but, you know, thinking about that next one and what the contents may look like and what we can all kind of help guide in that respect, if that makes sense.
Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So based on what Director Murphy is indicating, and I think some desires from, I've heard from Commissioner McGowan as well as Commissioner Nanjapa around some additional information or some questions being answered, or perhaps a different docket. Maybe I could be so bold as suggest that we consider doing, I think Commissioner McGowan has created a Google document that will enable us to present additional information we may be interested in and or questions that we would like to get answered. Perhaps we could schedule something around that mid-May. And then, I mean, as I'm looking at the calendar that Director Murphy just threw out there, we're probably looking at July for notice of rulemaking, and then rulemaking sometime early September. Does that seem realistic? Or, and I'm not suggesting we have to do that. I'm just trying to understand the calendar, I guess.
My recommendation would be is if you're noticing, if you want a hearing in the fall, we need to get the notice out earlier, like in that September timeframe.
Oh, closer to the rulemaking.
No, sorry, closer to now.
So you would want to do the notice of rulemaking like now for a September hearing?
Yep.
Okay. I guess I was under the understanding you wanted 3 months of, you know, contemplating an additional 3 months of stakeholder work prior to the notice of rulemaking with a draft set of rules and statement of basis and purpose, and then the rulemaking could follow up shortly, you know, within a couple of months of that. But I might be misunderstanding.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner McGowan.
Did I understand also, Director Murphy, that if we do a notice of rulemaking, there has to be a draft for people to see at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
so we're not there yet. We don't have anything to
No,
post
so-
today for rulemaking in September. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So I think the next step is, again, John, as Commissioner Messner has indicated, setting up a time where we can have the financial assurances additional questions that we developed last week, to have a meeting mostly with staff to discuss answers to those questions. And then at that point, we would probably be in a place to give kind of high level, we think you ought to go in this direction. And then staff is then tasked with doing the drafting. And then once we've got a draft, then we do the notice, and then we move into the actual hearings. Does that sound about right, Director Murphy?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so I think what we need to do is finalize the financial assurances additional questions. I looked at it over the weekend. I want to look at it one more time, get that to our staff, and then find out from them what's the appropriate time to try to get some answers to some of those questions. And then we can, again, have that meeting likely in early to mid-May. I'm taking silence as consensus. Okay, great. Other comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I believe we've gotten to that spot on the agenda which says adjournment. Do I see a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, folks, for sticking with us. Still see 37 participants. Great, appreciate it, and we will see you next week.